You know that specific moment at the end of the month when someone in the conversation mentions what they spent on restaurants this month, or on subscriptions, or on things they can't quite categorize, and gives a number that is clearly an estimate, a rough approximation, something assembled on the spot from an incomplete memory. And you already know your number, not approximately, not somewhere around. The exact figure, by category, because every dollar that left this month left with a purpose already decided, a name attached, a destination confirmed, a line in a system that registered it the moment it moved. The number never surprises. It simply never has, and it never will. While across the table, someone is adding up the month in their head for the first time, arriving at a total that is almost certainly higher than what they're about to say out loud. Here is what almost nobody calculates about not knowing where the money goes. The individual purchases are never the problem. The coffee is $4. The lunch is $12. The subscription renewed automatically. The impulse purchase at the checkout was small enough to forget by dinner. Each one, individually, is entirely reasonable, a decision that would survive any scrutiny on its own terms. The problem is that the brain does not naturally add them up. It registers each transaction as a standalone event, not as a contribution to a running total that is approaching, quietly, a number that would matter if it were ever seen clearly. The Bureau of Labor Statistics Consumer Expenditure Survey consistently finds that the average household underestimates its discretionary spending by 40 to 50%. Not 10%, not a rounding error. Nearly half of what is actually spent never makes it into the mental accounting of the person spending it. The system is built on this gap. Every retail environment, every subscription model, every one-click purchase flow is designed to make transactions feel smaller and more isolated than they are. Because the moment spending feels cumulative, it starts to feel like something that needs to be managed. The free trial that converts automatically, the recommended add-on at checkout, the price anchored to a monthly amount so the annual total never has to be said out loud. All of it calibrated to the specific cognitive gap between how a single transaction feels and what all of them add up to. Nobody explains this gap to you when you open your wallet. You only meet it at the end of the month, in the quiet arithmetic of a bank statement that has been keeping an honest record of everything the memory quietly forgot. There is a name for why the individual purchases never feel like a total. Researchers call it attentional myopia. Studies by Prelec and Simester at MIT show that the brain processes individual spending decisions in isolation, evaluating each purchase on its own merits, its own context, its own momentary justification, without naturally aggregating them into a cumulative picture. The coffee is evaluated against hunger and convenience and the cost of the alternative. The subscription is evaluated against the last time it was used. The lunch is evaluated against the day and the company and the price of the menu. None of them is evaluated against all the others. Knowing where every dollar goes is not a willpower exercise. It is a structural correction, creating the aggregated view the brain does not naturally produce, so that the decisions are made with the full picture rather than the isolated frame. And the cognitive pattern only becomes harder to see because of what the culture says about it. For years, the social signal has been the same. The person who gives every dollar a destination is anxious, controlling, unable to relax about money. Financial spontaneity, the ability to spend without thinking, is read as confidence and ease. Intentionality is read as insecurity and scarcity. Giving every dollar a purpose is not anxiety. It is the specific refusal to let a cognitive bias decide how much of the month disappears without being accounted for. And the data has been making the argument for years. The same consumer expenditure survey that documents the average underestimation also shows that households who actively give spending a destination consistently make different decisions. Not because they spend less on things they value, but because intentionality removes the spending they would not have chosen if they had seen it coming. 3 forces. A brain that evaluates each purchase in isolation and never naturally produces the sum. A culture that reads intentionality as anxiety rather than clarity. And a number, every month, quietly proving that the gap between what was spent and what was expected was never actually a surprise. It was simply never given a destination before it left. It was there the first month. Everything was tracked, not obsessively, not with a spreadsheet that required an hour a week, just a running total by category, and arriving at a number at the end that was not shocking, not alarming, just precise. For the first time, the month had a shape, not a feeling, not an estimate, a shape. It was there the conversation about a shared expense, a holiday, a home project, a purchase that affected both people, where the numbers were already known, already broken down, already ready before the conversation required them. Not from anxiety, from habit. And the slight surprise on the other person's face when the answer came without any hesitation, not because the numbers were memorized, but because they had never been allowed to become unknown. It was there the moment of realizing that a particular category, restaurants, or online shopping, or the small recurring charges that accumulated without attention, had been costing twice what it felt like. Not because the spending was wrong, because it had never been seen as a total before, only as a series of individual moments that each seemed reasonable on their own. It was there, the month of choosing to reduce one category deliberately, not because the budget demanded it, but because seeing the number made the choice obvious in a way it had never been when the number was invisible. The visibility did not restrict the decision. It clarified it. It was there in the specific, quiet confidence of a financial conversation that required no mental scrambling, no reconstructed estimates, no apology for not being sure. Because the numbers were already known, had always been known, and knowing them had never once felt like work. These are not people who budget down to the last cent. Most of them are not working from a rigid system with zero tolerance for variance. Some of them use an app, some use a spreadsheet, some have simply developed the habit of registering where money went at the moment it moved. A few seconds of attention that creates a running picture the month never had to guess at. They are the person who, asked what they spent on food last month, gives a number instead of a shrug. Something close to this. Groceries were about $300. Restaurants were around $80. I had 2 dinners out. That's actually lower than last month. That is not someone controlled by a budget. That is someone who chose intention over approximation and found that giving each dollar a purpose, over time, quietly changed the decisions without requiring any additional effort or restriction. They are not anxious about money. They simply do not allow the month to end without knowing what it contained. The way someone who cares about sleep knows roughly how many hours they got. Not because they are obsessed with sleep, but because it is information they decided mattered. They are not ever surprised at the end of any given month. Not by the total, not by any single category contained within it. And the very next time someone asks how they always seem to know exactly where the money went, that answer has been ready for years. Now, finally, the objection. Tracking every dollar sounds exhausting. I don't want to think about money that much. I'd rather just live and not obsess over every purchase. This is not about tracking every penny out of fear. If the system you already have gives you enough visibility to make deliberate decisions, nothing here is arguing for more complexity. Every arrangement has its own terms. This is about people who gave every dollar a purpose and found that the intention changed nothing about how they lived, except that they stopped being surprised at the end of the month. And the effort carries less weight than the objection assumes. Giving every dollar a purpose does not require daily attention or a complex system. It requires enough intentionality to know, at the end of any given month, approximately what each category cost, not to the cent, but to the degree that a significant overspend would be noticed rather than absorbed. The households that give spending a destination do not report more stress about money. Research consistently shows the opposite. Visibility reduces financial anxiety more reliably than avoiding the numbers does. The people who always give every dollar a purpose are not living with less freedom. They are simply refusing to let money leave without a destination, simply because leaving without one felt easier than deciding, until it didn't. Here is what most people get backwards. The person who never tracks spending is not living more freely. They are simply allowing the month to be shaped by purchases they will not remember, in categories they have not examined, adding up to a total they will only meet when the bank statement arrives and the month is already over. The person who knows where every dollar goes is not constrained by the numbers. They made the decisions with the numbers visible, which means the decisions were theirs, not the product of accumulated small choices made without seeing what they were adding up to. Most people know what they earn. Very few know what they actually spend each month. Fewer still give every dollar a destination before it leaves. And the person who knows that difference is not anxious about money. They simply decided that the number existed whether they looked at it or not, and that looking at it clearly, every month, without exception, was always going to be better than being surprised by it every single month, indefinitely. There is a moment people who always give every dollar a purpose all describe in almost the same way. It is not the first month everything was tracked. It is not the moment a category revealed something unexpected. It is an ordinary end of month, opening the app or the spreadsheet, or simply running the numbers in a head that has been keeping count all along, and finding that the total is exactly what was expected. Not relief, not pride, just the specific, unremarkable confirmation that the month is what it was, known, accounted for, without gaps, and without surprises. Not because nothing unexpected happened, because when unexpected things happened, they were seen immediately, not discovered weeks later in a statement that had been keeping a more honest record than memory was. The number was never the point, knowing it was. 10 years from now, nobody asks what system you used. They ask whether you ever once arrived at the end of a month without knowing where it went. Does every dollar you spend have a purpose before it leaves? Or does the end of the month still surprise you with where it all went? Has anyone ever made you feel like giving every dollar a destination was more trouble than it was worth? Drop it below. We read every single one.